gosh. All
The world
right.
can see us.
Yeah. Hello. We are live on some channels such as YouTube and Instagram. Um, we made it podcast here today, and I just want to open up with a couple very important things. We have a giveaway going on. Thanks to one of our guests slash listeners, Leroy, wrote a wonderful collection of books, and he's agreed to give one away. Eternus is the title, so you'll get a copy of Eternus, and you will get a copy of Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. So that's two free books. All you have to do is
Ooh.
enter on our Instagram. Our
Remember what we talked about?
Yep.
She's gotten out already. Oh man.
The books sounded nice, actually.
Yes. So, just a little, and sorry for those just listening. This is the lovely voice of my brother, Sean Patterson, who's joining us
Hi,
for the
hello.
podcast today. Yes, those books are lovely. I said this last episode. A New Earth, I think, changed my life reading it. I haven't read Leroy's book yet, so to be determined if it changes my life as well. But I do want to read it, so maybe I should enter this contest, and you all should too. So yeah, that was top of the app. Um, Yes, and we've introduced our guest. We have Sean on today.
Hi.
We like brought this up a couple weeks ago and you were on board and we were so excited. I feel like you and Colin were like in the midst of having this wonderful conversation. We were like, why aren't we doing this on the podcast? So here you are. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm actually really excited to be on the podcast because I I listen to so many podcasts and
Mhm.
um, I kind of see myself. I'll get into it deeper later, but I kind of see myself like headed in the direction of having at least some kind of social media following or whatever. I haven't
Yeah.
had one my whole life.
I was going to say
I've been
ever.
like a
I don't
ghost. I've been like a
Yeah.
ghost when it comes to social media.
You
Um,
are like one
I
one in a
remember,
million for
yeah, I
sure.
remember when
Yeah.
I was in like high school thinking to myself, this is going to be so unhealthy and like I should not
Oh,
get super into social media, and then just like making a conscious choice like when it first started blowing up in like the 2000s and stuff, just thinking to
yeah.
myself like I just want to like see people in person and connect with
I
people
have
more in real life.
I have a
um
curiosity about that. What was it about? Like, what did you see early on that made you think this is going to be unhealthy?
um
Red
Good question.
flags.
I think
Mm.
the first red flag was the amount I think it kind of dawned on me when I saw like my one of my friends at the time, his name was Scott.
Yeah.
He has a younger sister, and I saw her every single day run home from school to log into Facebook to chat with her friends for the entire evening.
Oh my
And
god.
I would go to his house and see her like run down to the computer, get
Yeah.
on Facebook, and then
Yeah.
just be typing to her like girlfriends or whatever
Yeah.
for like 5+ hours, and their
Probably
parents
till
didn't
parents
really
got
regulate it. people
home and
people didn't
had,
know to like regulate online
my
usage
gosh,
back in
no.
the 2000s, so
No.
they just didn't really care that much, I think.
Yeah.
And so, and I saw that like day after day after day, and I kept thinking to myself like, there's no way this can be healthy to just like
Mm-mm.
run down to your basement and like sit on social media. And then I spent 6 years trying to be a professional gamer, hiding in my basement, um, spending 12
Oh,
hours a
yeah.
day not seeing the sun and drinking coffee. But I'll get into that.
Were you streaming?
Mhm.
Was I streaming video
Like on
gaming?
Twitch kind of thing where
No,
you
I
Yeah.
was usually like the subject in the stream. So like I would be on a team and then the team would be on the stream because I'd be playing in some
Yeah.
in a
game or
group.
something, right? And then they would be
Okay.
like this team versus this team, and I would be one of the 5 people on the team. So like I get like Twitch exposure that way, but I didn't start my own stream or Honestly, I
Yeah.
probably should have,
See,
but
I don't want to say I always thought, but I had this thought that I was like, man, if Sean did that, like that would have been a game changer, I think.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think honestly there
It's
were a
never too
bunch
late.
there yeah, you're right. No, there was a bunch of moments I felt like
how do I fucking?
where I was like I was like headed on a certain path where I could have um uh like chosen to get into software engineering really early, or like coding really
Okay.
early, right? Like as a teenager, and then I'd, you know, be this like skilled coder like right after Facebook came out, which is like a good time to be a skilled coder or something,
Yeah.
right?
I
Or
don't think that's going away
I
anytime
think
soon.
that was my goal with professional gaming. I
Yes.
guess I'll
Mm.
get into it.
So when did you start where tell us your origin story of gaming?
Yeah, I think I'll start with like a brief kind of like origin story of my life, and that like leads
Mhm.
into the gaming, because then it
Mhm.
makes sense. So I'm obviously Jenna's brother. We grew up on a base in Montreal
Mhm.
at the beginning of our life.
Colin.
um, And I remember a lot of my formative memories were chasing video games. This might actually be why I avoided social media, was because I saw the pitfalls of like sprinting for video
Ah,
games, but then tried to make a career out of it because I thought it would be the right
It's hard to
thing at the
avoid
time.
something that's everywhere all the time.
Yeah,
it's true.
but yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember on the base, I'd be running around to people's houses trying to play video games. I was like 3 years old when I played Super Mario,
Can
the
I
first
just
one.
I would
Yeah,
like to add my cuz this is how memory is so interesting is that we both have memories of the same time in our lives, right?
yeah.
But your memories are going to be different than mine because it was
Oh
your
yeah.
life, your main character, I'm main character in my life. And I remember so many nights, mom losing her mind, being like, whose house is Sean at? Where is he playing these games? Like, not knowing where you were. And like, it was so safe. It was like, I don't say borderline culty, but like, all of our neighbors knew who each other were. All, at least one of our parents worked together. It was very much like a community kind of place. And I remember you for sure finding access to games at that time. And yeah, you were so
Yeah,
little. You were so
yeah.
little.
So yeah, I remember I don't have a ton of memories, and honestly, it's been kind of interesting. I've been learning a little bit of French recently, and it's actually jogged a little bit of my memories from my
Oh,
childhood,
interesting.
because, we grew up French and English, and,
Yes.
I spoke Fringlish, and
Yes. There
but
was a
then I
time I
ended up,
had to translate Sean for our parents. They're like, what is he saying? They'd look at me. I'm like,
yeah,
obviously this. They're like, oh, okay. It's like, gosh, our parents can understand. Anyways, yeah, it was that
uh,
time too. Because if you're three, I mean, Colin, you've had 3 year olds, they speak their own dialect.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I was like, I totally get it. Every 3
yeah.
year old has its own language. So, yeah.
Oh, but yeah, so I ended up losing my French later on, um, which upset me a little bit.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I lost my French later on, and I didn't end up getting it back. And I've noticed that like recently, I'll start to uh, teach myself more French. The last like month in specific, I think I've been learning a lot more than before. And I
Hmm.
noticed that as I remember the French, it's like you remember the connection to the words, like, oh, this word means this, and then there's an emotional attachment of that to, when I was in like kindergarten or whatever, and
Yeah.
was like speaking to another kid in French, saying like the same words, and like having that like emotional kind of
Memory.
connection from the language to the memories. So for me, I feel like it's actually a little bit hazy sometimes when I remember like 0 to 5.
Okay.
um, or 0 to 7 kind of years old.
I mean,
It's
I
a
don't.
lot of just like remembering like the blizzard that hit
Yes.
Montreal at the time, like kind of
Yes.
like key memories like that. I remember you had a friend. What was his name? Alex, I think.
Alex. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I remember him always annoying you.
He must
is,
have had a huge
is
crush
it
on her.
no?
Yeah,
Is it
I
what the
remember
Squirtle
feeling
toy
that way
used to
when I was a
say?
kid. Actually, yeah.
Is it what the Squirtle toy used to say? Zen Zenny. He
I
called me
don't.
that for years.
Oh, really? I don't remember that actually, but
Yeah.
I do remember him annoying you and like
Yeah.
thinking that he had a crush on you when I was a kid, but like not really thinking that much about it because I didn't care.
Mhm.
Because I was just like
Mhm.
a 4-year-old boy running running around. But
Yeah, you were
um,
living life.
so I'm running around, and my goal, I remember, was always to play games with people. It was like marbles, what were those pogs?
Pogs.
There
Yeah.
Oh,
was
Pogs,
Pokemon
Crazy
Crazy
Bones.
cards,
Bones.
all the like little toys you could get, Beyblades, whatever it was.
Oh my
I was
god,
trying to
Beyblade. Oh my
I
god.
was trying to get, yeah,
Yu-Gi-Oh? Yu-Gi-Oh?
I was trying to get every toy I could get and play every game with my friend. And I remember being very highly competitive as a person at a very
Okay.
young age. Like I think video games kind of teach you that because it's you versus X person when you're playing in a lot of these games. Like I think I played the first Mario parties, and it's you trying to beat, or like the first Super Smash Brothers, it's like you trying to beat your friend, right? So I was doing that from like ages like 5 and up, um, and I feel like it really made me really like competitive, you know.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
a lot of my friendships kind of form that way where um, we would have
Was
like,
this like a similar interest between them?
yeah, we'd have a similar interest, and we would sort of have like almost like, we'd compete in like a game, some kind of game, basketball, and then we'd go and play video games, and then
Mhm.
we even like as like discussions, we would have like kind of like arguments, and we'd like bond over arguments, right?
Oh,
So
interesting.
it was like yeah, which is very interesting. I feel like it was a very uh competitive kind of mindset,
Mhm.
uh, and not super healthy all the time in my opinion, because you're relating to people in kind of a
Who's
like
the
a
best
who's
kind
the
of way?
best, and you're
Yeah.
also, it's like there's always like a tension, you're not able to just kind of like chill with people,
Mm.
like hang
Mhm.
out, you know
Mhm.
it felt like it was always like a game of one-upsmanship. You know
Okay.
what I mean? Yeah,
Yeah.
which I didn't like in
Did it
hindsight.
okay, in hindsight. I was going to ask
Yeah.
like did it feel like that at the time or is that something you look back on and you're like, "Ooh, that's it's giving it's giving competitive vibes that are unhealthy." Yeah.
With some of my friends, it was healthy, like, because we were just joking around and having fun and having a good time
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah.
it did cause like some serious like conflicts with other people for sure.
Rifts. Yeah.
And we ended up kind of getting into like a very like tight knit group of just like a couple guys who were like the same friends forever because
Yeah.
of that reason. Because it was
Yeah.
almost like, you knew that you could kind of take it on the chest, kind of be like, guys kind of like shoving each other
Mhm.
around. You could kind of do that, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, um,
And it was harmless
yeah,
and you felt
exactly.
safe. Yeah,
Yeah.
ultimately.
I
Yeah.
Um,
think too, it's just mostly like you're young, you're just figuring shit out, right?
yeah,
You're
exactly.
learning how to play the game of
You
life.
just you just say shit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing fucking
Yeah.
matters. Yeah. There are no rules.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So growing up, I was getting really into gaming, and I remember, um, so our family dynamic obviously shifted pretty heavily and pretty starkly when our parents divorced.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then suddenly you and I were moving around a bunch and staying at random places while we got resituated in Ottawa with
Yeah.
mom.
Yeah.
Um, and that was really hard. I think it was really hard for me just to even understand conceptually what was going
Hmm.
on. I think I was a bit younger than you. I'm 4.5 years younger than you. So I
Yes.
think it was like a little harder for my brain to really internalize. Like sometimes I feel like when I think back on how I thought about it back then, is like I didn't even really think that my parents had separated for a while.
Okay.
Like we had been totally separate, and I was just like, huh, I wonder where dad is, and like just wasn't like
Yeah.
really internalizing deeply that like my parents were totally separated, you
And
know.
I will say, like, without that being explicitly explained to us, how are we to know or understand
Yeah,
really what was
kids don't
going on?
understand.
And
Yeah.
I don't recall there being that conversation specifically. There wasn't a, this is the end of mom and dad together and this is what we're doing moving forward. I think there was too much what it sounds like on your end, like there was a lot of unknown and like question marks about like what is going on. And then, but then you're a kid at the same time. So you're kind of just trying to, I don't say survive, but like,
Is it
Well,
questioning
that
or is it just being unaware? Like,
yeah, that's
do you
true.
remember being a kid and thinking old people just were? Like,
yeah,
you weren't going to be one of them. You weren't going to turn into an old person. We didn't all
Hmm.
just grow up. We're just
Yeah.
fucking old
yeah,
people.
There's
They were
just
just
old
made
people
that way.
around.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Born
There's
old.
uh
Benjamin
there's a
Button.
lot of like when you're a kid, there's a lot of just like accepting the way things
Yes.
are and not really
Yes.
questioning it because
Yeah.
that's just what it is, right? And I
Yeah.
really
It's true.
honestly I love this guru that I listened to a while ago, who said something along the lines of like, um, it's like we spend our whole lives trying to like get back to that like purity that we had when we were
Okay.
kids, you know.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's what a lot of spiritual practices are. There's a book I read called Purity of the Heart that talks about that.
Okay.
A lot of spiritual practices for like Buddhism and Zao, the Tao and things like that. A lot of them are
Mm-hmm.
about that
who's
kind of
this
thing.
guru?
I
Do you
forget
remember
who
his
it
name?
was.
Sadhguru or no?
Honestly,
It
I would.
sounds like a stupid name, but there's a guy I can't remember.
There's actually
I'm always saying
Sadhguru.
it wrong, but it's his name. I'm gonna look it up too, so you know I'm not being a dick.
it might it might be Seguru. It might be Osho. It might be a different person that I just can't think of.
Okay.
There's
Um,
so many of them.
there's so
Getting
many.
back
Yeah.
getting back to like our youthful state. Sorry, you were in the middle of a lake.
Yeah. Oh, so
Yeah.
anyway.
Where were we?
Um, so I remember that, and obviously, everybody has kind of like their challenges in life that they go through, and their hardships and their traumas and things like that. And it felt like that was one of the first kind of like big ones. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like it was like there was like this weight on me. Um, that kind of carried out throughout my childhood and teenagehood. Like I felt like, or I feel like in hindsight, I definitely had some kind of um, depression, like childhood depression. And I think at one point, this was like 3 years, 4 years ago, I might have looked it up, and I had a lot of the signs of childhood depression.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, just like, yeah, not asking for help, and just kind of like it's like you cocoon yourself,
Yeah.
you kind of
Internal.
insulate yourself. I felt
Yeah.
like I was doing a lot of self-insulating,
Yeah.
and I ended up bonding the most with my friends, I think, who had a similar situation where like they only um, you know I ended up being friends with um, Nathan, who's
Mm-hmm.
Kenyan and only had his mom, so we bonded over that. And
Mm-hmm.
then Santiago, who his parents were really like absentee and very like rough and stuff like that. So I ended
Okay.
up bonding with a lot of these people who had these like kind of difficult parent child kind of relationships, because obviously we all related, right? You know,
Relatable,
your
yeah.
mom sucks, or something like.
Could be, well, you could kind of like gripe and know that the other person
Yeah, you could
understood.
commiserate. You
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
you were on the level. You both kind of got it. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, and so I was growing up kind of feeling a lot of that, like depression, I think, weighing on me. And then I had these friends who
And that's
also were
heavy
in the
as a
same
kid.
boat. Yeah, and it didn't help that the culture at the time in like the 2000s was very like emo and like edgy and very
Yeah.
like like leaning into being like a sad boy. And then
My Chemical
A sad
Romance.
boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
and like that's where Sad Boy came from, actually, is like the beginning of like the 2010s, I would say. There was like that
Yeah.
era where I was getting into pro gaming and stuff, and all the gamers are just like, they're they're all just like sad guys who are like, I'm just gonna play video games in my basement
Mhm.
and like never speak to anybody again, and like
Mhm.
never go to a party or whatever.
Just be
So
super outcast, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And you kind of lean into it. There's an ego to that. There's kind of like an ego to being like um, almost like a victim superiority, like, oh, who can be the
Yes.
saddest? Who can be the like
Yes.
most
Oh man.
distraught?
Oh yeah, I fucking hate
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Who can out? That's all we do today.
Who
Is
can out
everyone's like, oh,
victim?
who can out
Victim
victim? It's just
mentality.
yeah, it's just brutal. It
And
just gets in the way of everything.
it's funny because I'm such a 180 to that now. I am the polar opposite of believing that anything's out of your control and like you can go through life being a victim or anything like that. But
Mhm.
I
Oh,
I was just talking. I had a therapy session on Friday, and I was talking to my therapist about that. And we're it's our relationship is weird. We almost our sessions aren't super productive from a pure counseling point of view. We often just have very intense
chit
conversations
chat.
about shit, and
Okay.
and topics that are super controversial, um, that make make it sound, and I got to be careful now, make it sound like some people don't have certain opportunities compared to other people.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, that perception exists, and in a lot of cases it can be very real.
Mhm.
oh yeah,
The way you were raised, how you were raised, where you were raised, who you are, where you're from, all that kind of stuff.
yeah,
But
Mhm.
ultimately, I believe that it comes down to, you know whether or not you're okay with this. Do you want to continue doing this, or do you not want to continue
yeah.
doing this? Do you
I definitely believe you have a lot of personal power. I think, and
Yeah.
and even if you are like a real victim, like you're a minority, you're in a place that doesn't accept you, you have all these things against you. Um, you know, the level you accept that kind of like bearing down on you is up to you, right?
Mhm. You're
You
in
still
control
have
of that. Yeah.
like personal power to push back against it, and in a lot of ways it's almost like your duty to push back against it, because if something's wrong, like, you should be doing something to make sure that you and your children and everything are not going to continue to be unjustly prosecuted or
Yeah, exactly,
persecuted
persecuted.
or
Mhm.
Mhm.
mistreated. Like, obviously, people who have like real oppression, um, they have
Yeah.
to actually deal with that, and it definitely is not. It's not
And
like,
it sucks, yeah.
yeah, it
But you
really,
can't
yeah,
I don't and this is going to sound super callous, and it's not a statement that should be generalized, but I simplify it too. You can't just, say the world's not fair and expect the world to change just for you.
Yeah.
You have
yeah,
to do you have to do something, or you continue living the way it's going.
I think
And I
that
don't know that
is
it's
the
a
ultimate
solvable.
victim mentality, is the expecting the world to change for me.
And I honestly, because echoing what Sean just said, like there is real oppression out there, and
Mhm.
it's these aren't easy conversations to have, and simply having the conversation is not changing anything either. Um,
Yeah,
but
putting a hashtag whatever support Ukraine and then changing your profile picture changes nothing. I know that they're like 5 cents of every picture goes back to funds to support
yeah,
this cause. And I'm like, but what is it actually doing?
that's
So
all just virtue signaling. Look how much
it
I
is virtue
care. It's all
signaling.
thoughts and
Hmm.
prayers nonsense. But I
Thoughts and
believe
prayers.
in that, in the personal power that you talk about, Sean.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
uh, I think what I believe is part of the problem in that sense is that there's so much ignorance in the world when it comes
Mm.
to that. And I don't mean people are dumb. I mean, these are conversations that we don't have. These are things that
Hmm.
aren't taught and not discussed. So, we as a society allow, and I don't think there's an example in human history where there isn't a group of people that has governed the tribe, the clan, the community, the village, the whatever. We always let people be in charge and they dictate what's important and what's not important, what's valuable and what's not valuable. And I honestly believe it's gotten to a point now where, I mean, all that matters to them is keeping, the general populace divided. And I think that's the ignorance that I'm talking about. There's no awareness of the personal power that you have. There's no awareness of the fact that a lot of this oppression doesn't need to exist. We just let it continue to be, because we continue to, pretend that democracy is a real thing that achieves
Yeah.
real
Yeah.
results. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 Um,
Sad.
yeah.
Yeah.
I I agree. I think yeah, I feel like it's pretty clear that humans are corruptible at like a baseline kind of level,
Mm-hmm.
and if to me it feels like this is my belief is that humans kind of need a evolution in consciousness um, to be able to kind of get to the next step, because trying to make a system like capitalism or communism or whatever, people argue, let's try this system, let's try that system. Obviously with
Mm-hmm.
communism they tried it and failed. With capitalism they tried it, it kind of worked for a little bit of time, but it is corruptible. And then you see what's happening now, corporations
Late
kind of
stage
control everything.
capitalism.
Yeah, late stage
Yeah.
capitalism is
Yeah.
far from democracy.
It's
um
terminal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're
so
in it.
to
It's
me,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, to me, it feels like there's no system um, that would work because people are corruptible. If we weren't corruptible, then capitalism would work. Or, if we were perfect, communism technically would work because we'd all have like perfect integrity and treat each other flawlessly and never do anything like malicious, right? But we're not that. That's not us. That's not like what the human race is, right?
Mm.
So I
What
feel
is it to
like
your understanding?
um,
It's a loaded question, and I know it's not an easy one, but I'm just curious because this is a space that I spend a lot of time in my
mm,
head.
Okay.
So I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I feel like the human race is like just a bunch of monkeys who never should have left the villages, and we got way too big, way too fast,
Mm-hmm.
and it's kind of at a stage where there isn't like simple solutions anymore because we've kind of been that frog in the boiling water for a while, uh, right? So I believe that um, the only real like the only real path forward is people have to work on probably two different things. One,
Colin
consciousness.
is knocking shit over
I
here.
am just destroying my studio.
Oh, great.
He's
One, I think people need to uh, evolve their awareness and consciousness, and that's a
Yeah.
big part of my spiritual kind of path.
Yeah.
And kind of my life goal for the rest of my life is kind of around this subject. Um, and the second thing I think is we need to utilize technology in a way that solves our problems. For example, everybody constantly talks about AI and the negatives of
Mm-hmm.
AI, and there
Mm-hmm.
absolutely are negatives to AI. And I think I even heard a story the other day about some AI program that unwrit its like own
Yeah, it's
code, and
security
like
measures kind
it,
of thing.
yeah,
Oh my
it
god.
was basically, and it sounded like some spooky like Terminator
Skynet shit.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's what you hear a lot with AI, but
Yes.
I feel like those are the two things that need to happen: is one, a drastic shift in consciousness, and two, and I think you're kind of seeing that a little bit with, like the fall of like traditional media and like people doing, podcasting, and people trying
Podcast is a big
to get
thing.
into spiritual endeavors and things like that. I feel like
Hmm.
that's part of that. And then the other thing is using technology in a way that actually uh,
Benefits.
benefits us
Yeah.
helps
Yeah.
and
that.
solves
So
problems, right?
just to
So
Um,
if
circle
yeah.
back, sorry,
Yeah,
Jenna.
yeah.
yeah.
The guy's name, you can't see the super glare here. Sad Guru. It's
Oh, I know
SADH
him. Yeah,
Guru.
I've
Yeah.
I
So
have him on my YouTube. I've heard tons of stuff by him.
well, there you go. So he's one of those
Subscribe to
guys
him.
that's he's got an elevated consciousness, at least according to his belief system,
Mm,
Yeah.
and he's leveraging technology to share that message and to pass that awareness to help other people elevate their
yeah,
consciousness.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's good.
He and Osho. I feel like he's kind of like the New Age Osho, because like Hinduism, it sometimes can kind of lead into a little bit of like cultiness, and Osho,
I've
unfortunately,
seen Osho before. Yeah,
yeah, he kind of allowed that to happen, where he just kind of allowed his whole circle to get corrupt, and he
I've
ended
seen
up.
I've heard a lot of stories of yogis and gurus who have become very
It's a
famous.
huge pitfall of your spiritual path, is that you
Mm-hmm.
can, on your path to trying to become, say, a spiritual leader, um, right? There's so many pitfalls, and there's so many ego traps, and there's so many things that can happen that can cause you to accidentally start forming like a cult or something. It's really hard to
It
avoid.
so you're saying you're like towing the line sometimes of like
Yeah,
Have you read the
of
book
those things.
The Untethered Soul?
I have not.
So this is an interesting book, and I'm sorry for interjecting here, but
That's okay.
um, this guy Michael Singer, very similar kind of thing to you. He's just like a regular guy, and he goes out camping one day, and he decides to try meditation. He goes out into this field, and for some reason, it really took to him. He, he's a young, I don't know, early 20s, let's say, and he calls it the untethered soul because the bottom line for him is that he stopped fighting the universe in the way it was trying to guide his life.
Mm,
So as an example, he wanted to just, he meditated for like 8 hours a day
yeah.
in various different sessions. He bought a piece of property. He built himself a cabin. He,
Oh, wow.
he, he, he,
This all sounds
he,
great. Yeah. Sign
he
me up.
turned it into a temple, like a meditation, I don't know, whatever kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm crazy journey. He ended up becoming a professor, which is something he didn't want to do. But again, he stopped questioning the universe.
Mm-hmm.
He started a medicine and healthcare record keeping software kind of company that
Mm,
was both a blessing and a curse. He ended up going to court for a long time for a while because someone committed fraud within the company, and
Oh, he
he and a
was
couple others
to
were kind
blame.
of
Wait,
the scapegoats.
I think I heard someone mention this to me a few weeks ago. Funny enough, didn't he get into like construction or something at some
Yeah,
point?
so
Yeah.
he built his cabin. He built another cabin. A cop came and was like, "Hey, I like this house. Who
Built
built
me
it?"
a
No, I did.
cabin.
So he started slowly building, and then that grew and it grew, and was getting loans and shit. So like he it was wild because this was not the journey he wanted to go on, but he
Zero.
became
Yeah.
immeasurably successful in so many different ways. But one of the things that was interesting is I can't remember the particular yogi's name, but he was doing sort of a world tour, and he was talking about his relationship with this guy, wrote letters, tried to get him to come to his temple and do his thing there, kind of thing.
Mm,
um Bottom line is that this guy kind of put a sour taste in his mouth because he wasn't what he believed, Michael Singer believed this stuff was supposed to represent, and it was the corruptibility of people, and you have a
Ah.
following, and then it's all about raising money and all this kind of stuff, and it's not the intent behind
Mm-hmm.
mm,
what he believes you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
anyway, it's a really interesting book. It's a very short book, um, but it really draws your attention to the idea that what you think you want and what the journey you think you're on, or the path that you've created for yourself. I mean, there's a lot of assumptions in that, and when you keep saying no to shit and you keep turning down these opportunities that maybe put in front of you, what else are you saying no to? And it
Yes.
it, it wasn't
Interesting.
always for fun. He was asked to, part of his PhD sort of process, he had to teach, and he didn't want to teach, and he
Hmm.
got away with it for a long time, and then push comes to shove and he ended up having to teach, and he hated it, but of course
Mm.
more opportunities arose out of it than it cost him.
Everything's a
So
learning experience, right? And
mhm.
the
Yeah.
other thing too is, yeah, like I remember someone said luck is uh you know y- putting yourself in the right place at the right time as often as possible until an opportunity kind of happens, and then
Hmm.
Opportunity meets
you call it luck.
preparedness.
Yeah, exactly, right. It's like, it feels like if you're saying no, you're kind of closing yourself off to the universe,
Hmm.
and the universe isn't able to kind of help you figure out what it is your purpose is on the planet, right?
Hmm.
uh,
I feel like you were kind of leading into that with telling us
Yeah,
the
before I
pla
interrupted a bunch, apologies.
oh, that's okay.
no, no,
I
the
don't mind.
place where you found yourself kind of, we'll say mid-teens, I think we were. And I feel like you were gonna dive into how you got
Yeah,
into professional
I was kind of,
gaming.
I kind of like the rabbit hole we went down.
I agree.
But
And this
That's
is
the
what
nature of the
happens.
show. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, cause yeah. Anyway, so yeah. So I was growing up and getting into gaming, kind of having like a depression as a kid,
Yeah.
um, and having it was a lot of it was a lot of like inner egotistical kind of like dialogue of like, I'm so sad and like I'm a victim, and kind of a lot of like self-pity, a lot of like wallowing and things like that
Yeah.
kind of happened. um, and it's and now I think it's very selfish, because when you look back on it, it's like you stop caring about other people. And obviously, in a lot of ways, it should be kind of like a cry for help almost if you see someone going through that,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
if your kid doesn't care when your birthday is, if your kid doesn't care, you know like about going to soccer practice, and he doesn't want to go out to do things, and it's like pulling his teeth to get him to go do some kind of extracurricular or whatever, like that's, I
Hmm.
feel like that's a sign that
Something else.
there's something bothering him basically. And I
Hmm.
feel like, there was something bothering me and I didn't know what it was for a long time, and it was just kind of like eating away at me slowly. um, and so our family, I felt like our family kind of slowly grew distant as time went on, where sorry, one sec. Yeah,
I'm
here we go.
sensing a sneeze. No, okay.
um, I felt like as time uh, went on, it was like, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't necessarily that uh, you guys weren't there, like Jenna
Hmm.
and my mom. Uh,
Hmm.
it's kind of like I was pushing you guys away, and just
It
kind
felt
of like,
easier.
yeah, it was kind of like I was just unconsciously kind of pushing my family away over time, and just kind of
Hmm.
continuing to cocoon and kind of continuing to self isolate. And I felt like, there was all these opportunities growing up. My dad was a computer technician, and I could have gotten into computers and like the tech field like very early on. And I was just kind of, because I was going through this depression, I was just like not pursuing anything really,
You were
right?
closed from all of those ideas because your mind just cannot fathom accepting something that might pull you out of it. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy
Yeah,
in
exactly.
a
And
weird way.
actually
Yeah.
goes back to that point about like you're shutting down the universe, right? So it's kind of
Yeah.
like all these things that I could have started to do or had opportunities to do, I just kind of was shutting it all out. And
Mhm.
I felt like uh, yeah, I just kind of felt like, I had no like family, and I, had these kind of adversarial relationships with my friends that were like not the best.
Mhm.
And I just kind of felt like I was isolating more and more, and the things I wanted to do in life weren't working out. So I was just feeling super nihilistic and stuff.
Yeah, what's the
Um,
point?
yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
get a bit like
Can I
defeated about.
can I ask a question, Sean?
Go ahead.
You said egotistical, and I think you know this might be pretty egotistical for me to suggest that maybe people listening aren't aware of it from your perspective. I think we think egotistical and we think arrogant and an asshole and stuff, but I think you have a different understanding when you're describing it.
Oh yeah, so when I think of the ego, I think of it more, I guess, more in a Buddhist sense, right? So
Yeah.
your ego is something that we all have. Um, even in this moment, your ego is what's driving you to want to make a podcast or something. Ego isn't always like positive or negative; it just is.
Yeah,
Mhm.
It's the character you kind of create to interface with the world.
Yeah.
Um, and in my mind, sometimes, the ego that I was referring to was kind of like, in that moment, it was identifying with the idea that I was, a victim, life wasn't fair, kind of identifying with this idea that, like, things weren't working out and the world was against me, or, you know, it's sort of that main
it's like
character complex where
it's
you
an
think like,
inward facing voice.
yeah,
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
only focused on your experience, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm so sad. And it was kind of egotistical in my mind to be like, oh man, like I'm so selfish, know. I'm like so sad about the state that I'm in, and I was just totally ignoring everyone around me, and probably hurting a lot of people in the process. You know what I mean?
I don't want to say unaware that you were, but like I will say that I was in the same place at the same time. So it's like
Mm,
when all, I don't say all these people, but I have a feeling maybe mom was too. And it's like we're all looking at our own selves and not turning the lens outward and saying like, hey, the people around me might need this, and there's, I don't want to say the art of life is, but there's this huge return on investment, if you will, by
mm,
looking outward and seeing what do the people around me need and fulfilling their needs too.
mm.
That gives back a lot, but you can't see that, I don't want to say at that age, but like
Yeah,
that is
in
something that I think until your frontal lobe is developed, you definitely like
I think
don't
the
yeah,
grasp
as a
properly.
kid,
Yeah.
you're not really able to like have that awareness that you would need,
Totally.
right?
Totally.
Um, And I feel like this is the concept of samsara in Buddhism. It feels like this
Yeah.
is why like it continues, because like I suffer and then I don't understand my suffering and I can't really deal with it. And
Yeah.
then, my children end up just kind of inheriting it if I don't figure
Yeah.
it out in a sense, right? So, and then it just kind of keeps going on and on and on.
Snowballs. Yeah.
Um, and so, uh, I think that it was almost like you kind of almost have to accept like, oh, there's nothing you really could have done at the time. Like you
Mhm.
just didn't
Mhm.
have the awareness,
Yeah.
right?
And
yeah,
Um,
didn't have the
also
tools.
and also and I don't want to say this is the hard thing to grasp, but like we cannot, you know, go back in a time machine and change things. And I don't
mm,
want to say we don't want to, because I'm sure some parts you wish you could erase, but like there's what brought us here and kind of like what you guys were talking about, um the untethered soul. Uh, what was his name again? Colin?
Michael Singer.
Michael
Mm,
Singer. Thank you. You know, he learned because of all the stuff that he'd gone through in his life to then be open to and so in some weird way I feel like life is suffering, and
It
so
is.
you have to go through these shitty parts to get the good stuff,
yeah,
and it's like the yin yang balance,
the
same
first
sort of thing.
four noble truths is all. That's
There you
all
go.
what it's about, right? Life.
Okay, so I
In
feel
life, there
like
is the existence of suffering,
yes.
and um, I, I feel like there's so much I could go into here.
Yeah.
So um, where should I begin?
Well, my question was going to be that at some point you kind of found you I think you went looking for answers and you wanted to get out of the headspace that you were in and the state of mind that you were in, and you were like, hey, I don't want this to be my life. And so I my perspective was that you were searching for what can I do to improve. I don't know if improve my life would be the right word, but like to find
Live
enjoyment,
happier, be more
live
content.
happier.
Yeah.
Yeah, do all those
Yeah.
things. And
I
so this
just
led you down this really wonderful path, I think.
get, and
Um,
just to add real quick, like I feel
Yeah.
like uh not to pile on, I was in a similar situation too, but
Yeah.
no, my
Please do. Let's all just
we
like
all have a
yeah.
we all have this inborn sense of justice, right?
mhm.
And so
Mhm.
when we talk about approaching these problems and having that ego in our way, it's I'm going to go on this journey to seek answers and get help and become better.
Right.
That's
And I'm looking
yes,
for
yeah.
other people to say, "Hey, I'm sorry that I did this. I'm sorry that," like, you're looking for justice from other people, but in reality, that's just the ego. And what the path brings you down is the idea that I use the example of when you have a bad breakup, the trope is I need closure in a relationship.
Mhm.
And I mean,
You
in a
just gotta
certain
leave it in
sense,
there.
yeah, in a certain sense, you want closure because you want to know, was it me? Was it you? Whatever. But when it gets to the point where you can no longer be in a relationship or you can't move on until someone else apologizes to you, you're
Ah,
just letting you're giving them the control to dictate how your life goes.
yeah.
Mm,
And I that's how I understood or came to understand how ego was getting in my way. I
Okay.
started
mm,
my therapy journey, thinking, oh great, I'm gonna have to have these conversations with people. I'm gonna whatever, whatever, whatever. And she's like, no, you have to stop thinking like that. And that's what she was saying is like
mm.
thinking that self-centered way, that selfish way is putting your well-being in other people's hands, and they don't give a fuck about you, not from a good point or a bad point.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
all dealing with their own shit.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
Right.
anyway, that's sort of what I wanted to add to that before we lost track on that
Yeah.
particular
Here,
point.
let me get back on track here because I was able to collect my thoughts a little. Um,
All I
so
heard was
yeah,
you
I
weren't listening to what I
so
was saying.
I've really.
Colin.
I'm just being a dickhead. I'm just being a shithead.
um, I I really liked what you said actually, where she said you don't have to think that way. Um, I feel like um, that was like a big shift for me. Was I was so locked into this kind of like mindset of thinking the way that I thought.
Your whole
Um,
understanding of the world.
yeah,
Mhm.
and I remember feeling really hurt and um, suffering a lot and then questioning like my suffering, and that's kind of what led into the
You
beginning
were
of me.
gaslighting yourself. Yeah. Yeah. Be like, did I suffer? I don't know. Yeah.
It's
It's
not
not
that
that bad.
bad.
Yeah.
um Yeah, no. So I was doing that. I was
Hmm.
questioning it. That's a funny way to put it, actually.
You were.
I
We
like
all
that.
do it. Yeah.
So I was like questioning my suffering, um, and I do think there was like a lot of real, uh, there's like a lot of real pain. Like, you know, mom, for example, she was sometimes really harsh. You know, growing up.
Very
Um,
direct lady. Yeah.
and I felt like, you know, I wasn't. It's kind of like you weren't getting the needs of like affection, or like not feeling seen, and there's like these real like pains that were like going on, and so
Hmm.
when I kind of started investigating that, I remember, you know, I'm playing video games, I'm growing up, and I kind of reach this block where, you know, I'm just kind of like coasting, like surviving through life, like I'm just kind of getting through high school, and I felt like it was always like a very like survival kind of mode, you know, very
Was it
like,
a feeling of like, I just got to get through this
yeah,
step
exactly.
and then that step? And yeah.
And I just kind of kept doing that, and then I'm going through high school, and then I'm going through, you know, I'm starting to get some things happen with my video gaming, like
Yeah.
I was playing Street Fighter at 16
Oh,
when it came
nice.
out.
He was so
um,
good.
and
He's so good.
Street Fighter 4 was kind of like a revival for fighting games at the time,
Yeah.
and so I got super into Street Fighter, and I was like a top 100 North American like Rufus
Jeez.
player, and I was like playing with all these like top 10 dudes, and like a lot of my friends on my friends list were like placing top 100 at like Evo, the biggest fighting game tournament in the world at the time. And so I knew I was like pretty good, and I was playing with a lot of guys who were pretty good. Some of them I knew who were sponsored and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So I was like, oh, I could go somewhere with this. I remember I was like 16, and you know, this guy is inviting me to these tournaments in New York, and I'm like, I'm 16, like I can
Yeah,
go
yeah, yeah. I'm
Yeah.
not
I'm
allowed to
gonna
video
cross
need.
games.
borders on my own.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So kind of that was kind of the beginning. I saw StarCraft 1 actually back when I was really young, when I was like 10 and stuff. I was playing StarCraft 1. And I'd see these like Korean dudes who were making a living off of it. So I got this idea in my head, that like maybe I could go pro at playing video games.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of like my like dream, right? Um, and by the end of high school, it was kind of like, you know, my mom's like, you know, what are you going to do with your life? I guess I'll go to college for computer
Oh,
network
I know.
technician.
What a dumb question, eh? I'm fucking 17. I don't know
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Your
So,
career's gonna change 16 times before you
Oh my
retire.
god.
Like, yeah.
They're
um,
talking about like this fucking corrupted world we live in. Let's ask 16 and 17-year-olds to decide what they want to do for the rest of their lives.
Yeah,
Now.
it's
yeah.
insane. It's insane. Yeah.
And it's crazy too, because, you know, you're taking like a kid who is kind of like broken and lost and doesn't understand what the hell's going on, and he's got like these very vague notions of what he wants to do with his life, and like, you know, what his dreams are and things like that. And you're just kind of saying like, okay, now, like, you know, um
Throw you
you
out
know,
into the world.
Yeah.
what career path in this like kind of subset of like career paths are you going to like choose, right? Like,
Hmm.
what are you going to go to
Hmm.
college for? Is it going to be for, you know, computer network technician, or is it going to be for something else? You start like framing your head and like, what can I get an education for so I can, you know, work this job or something like that.
Yeah, do
um,
my 9 to 5. Yeah.
it feels kind of like you're kind of getting like led along, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
A little bit
That
of a
was kind of
cattle
the feeling.
path. Yeah.
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 um
I will
and
say I've had this personal thought about specifically growing up in Ottawa, um and going like through high school and then post secondary in Ottawa. We've lost Colin. And I will just like, I don't know if it's the case or not, but it was just my feeling. It's such a government town that I feel like the mentality is that you must go this path as well. And like even private companies are kind of like unless it's a really big one, like a really well known one, then you're not kind of supposed to go that way. There's like this undercurrent of like, I'm not even sure the way to word it properly, but I
Mm,
definitely had this feeling of if I didn't go into a government job, I was like not gonna make it. And I don't
mm,
know if you felt this way. But I've been curious a long time about whether or not that's an Ottawa thing because I live closer to Toronto now, and the adults that I talk to work in all kinds of companies. Many of them have their own businesses, many of them work in private, blah, blah, blah. Like there's a whole array. Some people work
mm,
online. There's every shape and color that you can think of, right? And
mm.
I'm not even in the city. So this is kind of like the trickle down demographic. But I
Ah,
wonder often if you
no, I felt that.
have felt this way. And also, I wonder what would have happened if we just lived 4 hours away near Toronto. You know what I mean? Like, what
The
might have
difference,
happened?
yeah.
And I wonder if it would have been different or not.
It definitely would have.
Um,
I feel like this is
yeah.
kind of why I said we never should have left the villages because
Oh,
uh,
okay. Yeah.
is because I feel like we're raised in
He's back.
we're raised in capital. Hey, Colin. we're, we're raised in capitalism, and
Mm,
so we kind of it's like that's our worldview, and so we kind of
yes.
frame the structure of what we're going to do with our life and who we should be and who we are in relation to everyone else in that framework of like
Yes.
I should go and get my education and go and get my job and like you know what I mean. But if you were
Yeah.
in a village in I don't know like China or something, you would just like pick your vegetables and like live your like farming life. You wouldn't have that like framework of like got to start a business
Big
and do all this
city.
stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you look at the top centenarians in the world and they're all in Japan. And I watched this
Right.
documentary of a guy who went and interviewed them all, and they're all like Japanese farmers, and
Wow.
it made me think like I see a lot of things with
There's a
Buddhism
trend.
and I see a lot of stuff with like the blue zones, and you see that like it's very obvious that the optimal way for human beings to live is like a very mindful lifestyle where you're doing a moderate amount of exercise on a regular basis, and you're not kind of pushed into this world that we're in now with North America, where it's very I go into work and it's like get your 8 hours done as fast as physically possible, and you're just you can't even stop to think,
Streamlined.
Oh, it's so boring.
right? And I feel like
Mm.
our society is not set up in a way that really makes sense for human beings and ideally how human beings should be like living, but that's a consequence of it, of like I said, like us leaving the villages, and now it's like the population's massive and it's like everything's built up to this extreme point where the only way you can function um, in this place is to do these things, work your eight
It's like
hours
a
or whatever.
necessary evil.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right. It's
Mhm.
like
I see a
that's
lot
like
of people homesteading these days,
yeah,
Yes.
and I see
that's
that like as
all
an answer to that.
Yeah.
you see a lot of that movement. When I first moved here, I remember I saw a documentary on the people who live in Salt Spring Island near me,
Oh my
who
god, I
are
love Salt Spring
they're all
Island.
trying
Sorry.
to live off the grid,
Yeah.
and stuff like that, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's like people returning to that realization that um
Which I
you
want to
know
say, in all irony, there are some estates on that island that are like
yeah,
millions of dollars with like yachts docked outside. And so it's like this, it must be just like a very juxtaposed kind of place where
yeah,
there's like
that's kind of
high.
what
Yeah.
feels like in Victoria too. Victoria
Interesting.
feels
Okay.
very like all or nothing
Okay.
sometimes, like there's kind of like the lower middle class kind of people, and then
Yeah.
the neighborhoods 15 minutes away are like mansions.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're just like total like mansioning estates.
It's wild.
And so there's a pretty huge disparity that you see, and it was kind of jarring actually when I moved here. But anyway, I'll kind of
We digress.
I'll, I'll kind of go back to the whole what happened. So because I was a little long-winded with it, but um, so growing up, I had this idea. Okay, I'll become a professional gamer, and so I spent basically from about 19 till like 25, 26,
Uh-huh.
um, pursuing
You were
a
like
career
honed
as a
in.
professional gamer. Yeah, I was like
Yeah.
really locked in, trying
Yeah.
to become a professional gamer with some mild success. Nothing really crazy that I can brag about. It was an upsetting space in some ways to be in because I pushed myself to be one of the best players at this game called Dota 2,
Yeah.
um, and I ended up um, getting on like a tier 2 team that was able to contend with the teams that were actually making the legit money.
Yeah.
But it didn't really get too far past that. And I feel like the turning point for me was that throughout the journey, I felt like because my dream wasn't really being realized and because like I wasn't really getting all the things I needed in life, from like family and friends and all these things, I felt like
Outside of
I
this.
felt I felt
Yes.
so like almost like you're at the end of your rope and you're just
Yeah.
kind of like I've shot my shot and there's nothing left kind of a feeling. And
What more
so
could there be? Yeah.
yeah, and so this and professional gaming is not good for your mental health, so it really did kind of escalate a mental health decline. And I feel like a big reason why I didn't succeed as a professional gamer was due in part to the fact that I wasn't taking care of my mental health. Um,
Yeah.
and so
That's yeah, because it's
what kind of happened over the course of those years trying to succeed as a pro gamer was I just started getting, more and more depressed and like nihilistic, and I ended up reaching like my absolute bottom, and I
yeah.
felt very like suicidal. I ended up, looking into all the various ways you could commit suicide, and then picking away, and then thinking about, okay, when do I want to do it? And it was a very hard few months that I went through where I had legitimately taken the time to figure out what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it and when I wanted to do it, and then made a plan to do it. And then pretty much went all the way to the point of fulfilling that plan. Um, had a rope, was in the forest, and was really like there. I was like sitting right there, putting it around my neck and like just moments away. Um, and I
I'm just
think,
gonna say, Sean, I'm really glad you powered through.
thank you.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
happy. I'm so happy that you're here telling us this story, vice any other outcome. I'm
mhm.
really grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because it
Colin, you
really,
took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah.
it really is. It really is. Thich Nhat Hanh says this very well. You don't have to die because of one emotion. Um, Suicide in a lot of situations can be, uh, you know, you have felt this way, and then all it kind of takes is that sort of rush of an emotion, right? And it's almost like it was almost like a coin toss, right? Like in that moment, if I had felt that rush of that emotion, who knows if I would have done it or not? You know what I mean?
The
Yeah.
It
universe was on your
really,
side that day.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
We
was gonna
need you.
say the universe, it was very much on my side for sure that
Hmm.
day. I think what really kept me from going through with it um, in that moment was I suddenly snapped out of my sort of selfish mentality for 1 second when I had it around my neck, and like really deeply internalized how this would affect, you know, my family, how this would affect other people. And I had kind of distanced myself from them, um, because, you know, I kind of wanted that to be easier, right? I didn't want to think that it would be as hard if I was more distant. Um, and I feel like it was almost like something kind of like snapped me into that state of thinking about, um, how the world would be impacted by the, and this is ego again, is like how the world would be impacted by, you know, me dying, and thinking like, you know, all these people will suffer, and I'm someone who is like deeply against making other people suffer. I'm, you know, a very nonviolent person, and I've always really believed in nonviolence. And so it's almost like I hit like a moral understanding of like, well, I don't want to make other people suffer, and this choice is really going to make a lot of people suffer. And
Mm-hmm.
there's something Thich Nhat Hanh, he says that, you you know, you'll impact all the future people, um, as well, right? So like all the people that I might have been friends with, all the people that I might have been able to help out, in their tough times, like I wouldn't be
The
there.
butterfly effect of your
Yeah,
life.
and it's
Yeah.
almost like it's almost like I recognized that this was my samsara like getting me, and that it's almost like I went like, fuck you, I don't want to let my samsara take me down, because that's actually going to create the samsara for other people, and it's going to, you know, overflow their buckets because they didn't have, you know, help from somebody that they might have needed in a time, and then they would commit suicide because they didn't have someone to help them. And so it's
Mhm.
almost like my brain went into this space of understanding that, I want to put an end to that cycle of, uh, people suffering. And
Break the cycle. Yeah.
and since then my focus has definitely gradually shifted towards wanting to reduce the suffering of the world, and build community, and sort of, uh, be, um, be someone who helps other people get through those difficult emotions that I was going through and luckily didn't get,
Mm.
consumed by. Right? And now I think like, you know, if my life mission is to help other people not be consumed by suffering, that's a pretty worthy thing to aspire to do in life, I believe.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
and
Looking,
so, sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
looking back, this is going to sound like a weird question, and I feel like it- I'm okay to ask this to you. Almost like that was a necessary place for you to get to in order for you to get to where you are now.
Absolutely. I definitely think I needed to go through that
Yeah.
experience.
Thank you, guys. Okay, thank you. Damn kids.
We're talking about some real shit here. You
Yeah,
you'll
seriously.
you'll you'll know soon enough when
Oh
you're
God. Makes me sad to think. I wanted to
um
say I'm very grateful to your ego that day. But yes, I and Colin, that is such I don't want to say such a good point, but yes, like that's a low point, and like you
yeah,
grow from that moment. Like, do you feel like that? This is gonna sound so cheese, but like, was that a rebirth moment for you?
yeah, for sure. It
Yeah.
definitely felt like, that I had to reach that point to be able to, recognize, um, that it's almost, so the Buddha talks about it like you're in a dream, right? You're in a
Mm.
trance right now. And it's almost like I was in this like trance of just kind of, being consumed by suffering, and it's almost like I had to go through that process of, having all these things happen to me and me going through that uh, um, to really um,
Almost puts things into perspective.
yeah, exactly. It exactly. It was the necessary step to help me sort of make that shift mentally out of that like negative, depressive sort of like internal kind of headspace. Um, and this kind of coincided with so I was preparing for a really big tournament, and then our father passed away, and so our dad passes away. We go through that whole experience. I feel like I was disassociated the entire time, like
It went
like
by. It was like the
just
longest minutes of my life, and yet the shortest
It's like a blink.
days. Yeah.
yeah,
Like I feel like it went by so fast, and every single second was like you're on adrenaline
yeah.
for sure.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
then and so he passed away, but he actually passed away during the biggest qualifier of the year for the biggest tournament that I had been preparing for years for my
Yes.
video gaming. So it kind of came at this point where it just like totally sidetracked my gaming career. But I think
Mhm.
that was a good thing because it was almost like the universe giving me a sign that I had to kind of shift away from that place. And
It
so I
was
did. I
almost
kind of,
forcing you.
I
Yeah.
almost like overhauled my life at that point because after he passed away, I went through that um, period of like feeling suicidal after. Um, and then going through all those emotions. And that's when I started
Yes.
to find Buddhism and I started to work on myself. I started to kind of start to think like, how can I dig myself out of this like this like hole that I've sort of entrenched myself into. And so I, at the time,
And
I
I
was
I
just
think
sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say I think that the idea of going through a grieving period maybe alerted you to find all of these, I don't want to say solutions, but like to dig a little deeper maybe. I don't know if you were doing it before, but I feel like grief can be a period of growth as well in
Yeah.
strange
Well,
ways. But yeah.
there's a phrase I love in Zen that says no mud, no lotus. And the idea is that
Mm-hmm.
without the gross, ugly, grieving things,
Mm.
there is no joy. Because without, without the bad times, how are you gonna know the good
There's no light
times?
without the
Yeah.
dark, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like from
Yeah.
Jocko's podcast, there's no light without the dark. I really like
That's where
that.
I got it from.
Yeah.
I just
Oh. You're like, I didn't make it up myself. Yeah.
can I,
Oh.
Sean, I want to ask, have you heard of a gentleman named Rupert Spira? Rupert Spira, I think he's sometimes called.
No.
He's I want to call him a philosopher. I don't know what else to call him. He was recommended to me by my first therapist, and I listened to a bunch of his stuff. And essentially, his messages, we all talk about, we all approach the world through this ego lens, which is
Mm,
how I am interfacing with the world and how the world is impacting me.
Mm.
And so, we look at other people, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, and the things they do or don't do, the things we got that we didn't need, or the things that we needed that we didn't get.
mm,
And
Mhm.
we think about how it costs me, how I suffer because of it. Um, his philosophy is, and I kind of break it down to, we often think that we're physical beings trying to pursue a spiritual existence.
mm,
Mhm.
So we're here on this earth and we're trying to find awareness, consciousness, we're trying to find God or religion or whatever it is. um, but I think what we really are is spiritual beings having a physical existence or physical experience.
I like that
Mm-hmm.
framing. Yeah.
Well, and in the sense, and then from a samsara kind of thing too, or some people might say reincarnation. There's a lot of different perspectives on it. It's that this isn't, you know, before we were born, we were a thing, and after we die, we are a thing. This is just a sort of a stepping stone on the journey.
Mm,
And to that end, he says, there is no, if like who if I ask you who Sean Patterson is, you couldn't describe yourself in a non-physical sense. So you can ask someone who you are and then describe themselves. Okay, if I chop off your leg, are you any less Sean Patterson? What about the other leg? And you could go all the way back to, if I got rid of your whole body, who are you? What is you? And I think
mm,
that's how we can kind of get to that understanding that there's a soul, a spirit, a consciousness,
mm,
whatever inside of us that is who we are. And that's, where things like, you're not your story. People get so self-conscious about their body image, but it's so irrelevant because that's not who you are. You
mm.
didn't choose your body. You didn't choose the way that you're presented to the world outside of how you dress and
Yeah.
how healthy you decide to be. Um, but you know that spirit, that soul, that consciousness, whatever, according to Rupert Spira, is actually the oneness that religions talk about, or it's the God that religions talk about.
Mm,
But we are all the same consciousness
yes.
having a
Physical experience.
well, and the reason why it's so hard to see that we're the same consciousness is that your consciousness is run through this physical avatar.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
like, I am the all being, the all powerful, the all seeing, but I can't be that because I'm forced to live by the rules of this universe, this dimension, this physical world, or whatever it is. And I think, you mentioned earlier a lot about the evolution of consciousness and stuff like that, and awareness. And to me, this is sort of where my mind goes. I don't know that I believe it. I don't know that it's true. I don't know that we can have any of the answers. But I think this is what a lot of religions are referring to. They say we are all made in
Yeah.
God's image, right? Like, well,
Mm-hmm.
it's not the physical sense that anyone's talking about. It's
Yeah.
the who you are beyond all of it that is what they're talking about. So when
Yeah.
you talk about, I think people who are truly empathetic can appreciate it a bit better because you can feel what people are feeling. You can
Yeah.
understand what they're going through. You can put yourself in their shoes. And I think that's just your connection with whatever that is a little bit stronger than maybe some other people have. And I think this is where things like ignorance is bliss truly have power. When
Shine.
it's
Yeah.
not that you don't understand things, like I don't understand math, so the world is easier. It's, well, when you're living in your own little world and you're not aware of the connection that we all have to each other, it's a lot easier to go through life being selfish and being self-centered and worrying about
Yeah.
yourself. But
Your mammal brain can only handle so much, right? You're just a monkey, you know.
well, yeah, yeah,
And
and to
so,
that sense, like, you're not the monkey, your body's the monkey.
right.
And I think accepting the suffering that you've accepted, and choosing to own the suffering rather than having the suffering own you, brings you
Mm,
closer to that level of awareness, that level of understanding. Again,
yeah.
this is just one perspective. It's Rupert Spears, and I know it's shared by a lot of other people. I think it's a really powerful perspective in the sense that I'm no longer talking to Sean. I'm no longer talking to Jenna. I'm
Mm,
not yelling at my kids. These are all me. They are all me. I am
mm.
them.
Interconnection is the one of the cornerstones of Buddhism, really. Um, the interbeing, sort of the just the concept that we're all connected. Our bodies, everything about us is all made up of non-self elements. There really is no true self if you look deeply enough, right? Um, like you're not this thing behind your eyeballs.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Um, and
It
I
goes
bel
further than that. Sorry.
oh
Go
yeah,
ahead.
and I believe that
But there's
um,
more.
I'm the ShamWow guy of stupid ideas. Anyway, sorry.
You said it goes
um,
further than that.
I believe that we truly are all connected, um, very deeply. All of time and space, everything that's ever happened is all available. Uh, it's almost. Have you ever heard of Indra's web?
No.
In
Injure. How do you spell injure?
Indra, so
In
Indra.
Indra. Okay.
So
Okay.
Indra's web
I'm gonna Google this
is
real quick.
Yeah, me
um,
too.
Me too.
it's this idea of imagine a spider web, and at each uh, point in the web, there is each connecting point. There's a droplet of water, and each droplet is mirroring each other droplet infinitely.
I'm looking at this right now. It's
So,
intense.
do you know, Sean? Do you know what that is?
What?
Scientifically, that can be represented scientifically too. That's a hologram.
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's interesting because a lot of Buddhists say a lot of things. I think the Dalai Lama has a famous quote where he says, um, as soon as you disprove like some belief of Buddhism, I'll accept it. Because he kind of understands that Buddhism is kind of a lot of these teachings, like interbeing, are all connected to science, and that um,
It
they've
is
they've
mind-boggling.
and they've been observing that for a very very long time, and that now science is just like essentially
Catching up
telling
to Buddhism.
it's like catching up, like it's telling them what they have always known, which is that all of space and time and all of the atoms available from the Big Bang are right here if you look around.
This
And they're
is mind-boggling.
and so to get back actually, because this is very good, this good point that connects to the beginning of me um, starting my spiritual path, I guess you would call it. So uh, I end up looking at all these videos online of like Alan Watts and all these things.
Got a couple of his
Um,
books here.
he's great. I like him.
I do too.
And just kind of slowly getting into Buddhism, and then I meet my girlfriend Lily, who I met on the pretense that I was on like an online dating site,
Mm-hmm.
and I wrote in the profile like Buddhist, and that was literally what drew her to me. Was she saw that I was Buddhist on my profile,
No, I'm just kidding.
and she met me, and then she really helped me to kind of start my whole second phase, I guess you would call it, of my life since
Mm-hmm.
exiting professional gaming. Um,
Okay.
I'd love to get into that at some point. That's like a whole thing to get into, professional gaming, because that's just such a crazy world. But yeah, so I meet Lily, and I'm like just getting into this. Like I'm very new to Buddhism. I just heard of it. I'm like just checking out videos and stuff, just understanding mindfulness for the first time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and she's known about all this stuff forever. Like her mom was like a very progressive person. She was raised vegetarian, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and had like a lot of the like kind of like left hippie progressive kind of like views, and was teaching or like reading books on Buddhism and like believing in Zen Buddhism and all these things. Like this is her environment growing up. Like her whole atmosphere growing up is like 20-year-old adults who are into mindfulness and smoking weed and listening to Bob Marley and like understanding like interconnection and all this stuff. So this is like her baseline almost.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it was really interesting to see, honestly, and drew me in a bunch. And so obviously, she helps me kind of develop um, my views and sort of spiritual journey and all these things. And I'll give her a shout out actually that she, in my mind, she really helped free me and free my mind. Uh, so shout out to my soulmate Lily for helping me
Mm.
free my mind. I think sometimes in life you get really lucky and you meet somebody who really
Preach, brother.
helps you be the best person that you can be. And I often think to myself, man, I I am so lucky, and I don't know why I deserve this. Sometimes I get that like almost like imposter syndrome where I'm like, I, d- a lo- it's almost like you weren't worthy of like being given such a blessing. You know what I mean? That's kind of the thought that goes through my head, and then it's
the the important thing about those thoughts though is that they're completely unrelated to anything you actually deserve or anything that you should actually experience, because those are just those are the voices that are in your head, and those voices are other people's voices.
yeah,
Mhm.
When you're growing up, your subconscious is the voices you hear now as an adult are all coming from your subconscious,
mm,
and that framework was developed during your formative years. So
Yeah.
as you just discussed, you felt as a child like you weren't worthy of people's love, you didn't deserve
exactly.
their time.
Yes,
And so
yes.
now as an adult it's hard for you to recognize that and say, hey, yeah, like I've been learning that the important thing to do is to not entertain these voices. And uh we create these versions of ourselves, these protectors,
Mm,
when we're kids, so that we can just process properly and survive, quote unquote. It's a strong word, and I think most people could appreciate it if they look back to their own experience. But it's not about surviving per se, but it's about being successful from day to day within the environment that you're growing up in.
mm,
And so I've been learning to you step inside your mind, and I have a conversation with these versions of myself, like anxiety. I really like anxiety. Anxiety is not something you have, it's something you experience.
mm,
It's just your body trying to communicate to you. And sometimes it's valid and sometimes it's not. And you can go inside and be like, hey, I appreciate what you're trying to tell me right now, but that's not the case. Everything's fine. And I do this almost daily. Uh,
mm,
I have conversations with Cassie, and there's always a part of me that doesn't believe what she's saying. I
mm.
always think she's just saying shit to humor, like, yeah, just to make the problem go away or whatever. And I'm like, oh no, she's not actually okay. She's just saying that so we don't have to have the conversation, or so she doesn't hurt my feel. You know what I mean? But
Yeah,
then I have to
no,
go
I know
inside and be
what you
like,
mean,
hey,
man.
hey, fella, trust people, trust the person that loves you. And instead of
Believe
Yeah,
them.
it can be
Yeah.
hard. It can be
it's so
really
hard
hard, man.
because these aren't just versions of you that you have in your mind. They're complex neural connections, or
Yeah.
they're pathways. If muscles have memory, your brain
The
certainly does too. And it's
programming goes deep. It's called conditionings in Buddhism,
Mhm.
and the conditionings go real deep. Like I read this book called Prisoners of Childhood that kind of talks about this. And kids who are 0 to 2, they pick up their parents' anxiety. Like if my mother, for example, is really anxious. She was a very anxious person. You pick up on that
Ask
as a
her about
kid.
it though.
Yeah.
Different
Yeah.
thing.
Your
Sorry,
brain.
just like
Yeah. No,
gaslighting her a little bit. Sorry, mom.
uh, um, yeah, no, your brain really it starts to get those conditionings, and then they start to get hardwired because then they start to form your habitual way of talking and way of acting, and before you know it, you've conditioned yourself for over 20 years. Your whole brain's developed with these conditionings. um,
hard to
and
walk
it
that
can be
back.
so hard to peel that away, and that's the process of meditation, is peeling away those layers, like a really crazy gigantic onion, and you have to
Mm,
pull like 5 billion layers back. It just takes so much work and so much time.
mm-hmm.
And so I
Which
started to get into meditation
So
when I
was
met my
this like
girlfriend.
your
So
goal
I'm
when you
I'm like
started?
20. I'll get there. Yes,
Sorry.
it is. So I'm like 25, and I meet my girlfriend, and then I start getting into Buddhism. I start learning about meditation, um, and really starting to figure out who the hell I am for the first time. I didn't realize that I was surviving for so long and like sad and all these things that I wasn't really allocating any time to figuring out who the hell I was or what I wanted to do with life. I was
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like coasting, and I was like, well, I've been playing games my whole life. I guess I'll try being a pro gamer. That sounds really cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of cool, like for a time. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely felt like it was just kind of like I was just kind of like lost. And so for the first time, I was really kind of figuring out, who I was and what I wanted to do in life. Um, and I noticed that I just kind of got drawn to addressing all of my mental health issues and stuff like that. So I started looking into, psychology. I'd always been interested in psychology. I even considered it as a career path, but I started learning more about psychology. I started, meditating more. I started to consume all this media from all these different sources, philosophy, um, podcasts. I learned about, um, Nietzsche, and um, I'm trying to remember his name now. Um, Here, I'll look him up.
I was wondering too if you talked about when your dad passed, if it was like maybe I need to stop gaming, but I wonder if it was less that because gaming obviously was a productive outlet for you and it was a great way to socialize. I wonder if it was more
There
maybe you
was
should.
definitely a social aspect to it. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, well, I wonder if maybe maybe if there was any message if in the timing, like, hey, maybe Sean, it's time for you to focus on yourself a bit more,
Mm,
instead of worried about the rest of the world. Like, I worry that maybe you shouldn't have turned off gaming. Maybe gaming's a really good thing for you, and you could still
I
pursue
do
that in a
I do think that I got like most of like the pros and like the good things out of gaming
but
that
like a
I
paying
needed to get.
career. Like,
Um,
would you want that to be the your sustenance to
oh,
live in
like
this
at this point.
capitalist pig world? You know what I mean?
That was a huge motivation for why I wanted to be a professional gamer. I remember specifically feeling like stuck by the capitalist paradigm and
And
wanting
but
to
why?
escape.
And
And it's an alt sort of
I agree with
form
you. And you
of career. Yeah.
income.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned it earlier, Sean. But I look at media streaming media is made like
It's
network
huge.
television obsolete, and now
Yeah.
they're passing laws where fucking streaming sites have to have a certain amount of this kind of content on. I'm like, how fucking garbage is that? Where people
How's the
figure
government
out
getting involved in that?
I know, like, fuck off. Do you know
Why?
why there's no Canadian programming on Netflix? It's because Canadian programming sucks. It's poorly written, it's poorly produced. No one gives a fuck. Okay,
Mm.
like
Miss Rachel alone does better work than most of the
honestly, like
Canadian programming.
I
Yeah.
find it, and so that's
What do
why
we
I
have?
love,
This hour is 22 minutes. Is that it?
and it's like a cheap version of SNL
So, yeah.
because
Cheap.
SNL will outright make fun of people. They only attack politicians, and they're not really people.
Yeah.
Mm.
They're speaking of gaming, I've one of the um perceptions I've read from a number of people, we've all heard that we're living in a simulation, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, the Matrix kind of
Yeah,
philosophy,
yeah,
which
and
like there is like some kind of
merit.
merit to that like idea. I don't think it's quite the same as the Matrix, but
But
Yeah, it's
one
not
thing I
in
want to
that exact
explore,
form. Yeah.
mm,
because we think of a simulation in the sense that someone that looks like us is above
Controls
us
it.
controlling everything. But
mm,
I think what a lot of people are saying is the simulation is um whatever that force is that makes us conscious is create. Because let's talk about reality. What is reality?
I was gonna
There,
say, what even is that? Yeah.
what you see and perceive
Sense
is,
perceptions. So
but
reality
there is no
is
physical reality.
reality as far as like we can tell. It's all sense perceptions, right? What you can see and taste and touch.
It's just
Uh,
fucking shocks in the brain. It's your
And when
neurons
you look
firing.
into the nature of consciousness, what you kind of see is that there's an arrow of attention, right? Your brain is kind of like an arrow. It's kind of looking around and it sees Colin's face and it sees, he's got these eyes and, this hair color, and it thinks these thoughts based on sort of its attention. And what I've been learning through meditation is that there's stages of sort of raising your awareness. So I'll give you an example. Um, a common kind of meditation someone will do is they'll sort of think about, um, you know, their sense perceptions. They'll start, with your a body scan, kind of like think about your head,
Yeah,
your nose, all that stuff.
just demonstrating that you can direct where your thoughts go.
Yeah, and then some other meditations will be like a love meditation, and you'll show yourself love, and then you'll give like love to the people next to you and the animals and plants next to you, and then it'll kind of expand outward until you feel love for the whole planet, the whole universe. Um, and so I noticed that there's kind of like stages to um, to raising your awareness, like the arrow of attention will kind of um, it's kind of like what your ego is identifying with. You're identifying with, the person uh, inside of your head. Sean is looking at computer screen, right? And then as you kind of expand your consciousness, you'll kind of sit and kind of feel that like you're connected to everything, and you'll, instead of identifying with the person inside of your head looking at the computer monitor, let's say, you
Yeah,
start to feel kind of connected with the room around you, and then the world around you. It goes out all the way
I
until
try
you
to.
get to the planet or the universe or something like that. And that's the next stage, is like you're identifying with your environment. You're identifying with, what's around you, and kind of feeling connected to it. And then um, the next stage after that is kind of like losing. Um, it's kind of like you're losing the concept of being identified with the environment. You stop identifying with the concept of identification almost. Um,
One thing
and
that I like to do, sort of that
sorry,
helps
go
me
ahead.
experience that, is I try to just view, like I'm watching a movie. You see yourself watching a movie, and you're like, okay, this all looks real. This all feels pretty real, and you can feel the emotions, and you can put yourself there.
Mm,
I take myself back and look like I imagine myself looking into my reality, my world, as if it's on a screen, kind of
mm,
thing. So it's the same idea, similar idea, that uh I'm not just me experiencing this, but I am the thing experiencing all of it. I don't know if that makes sense. But the reason why I find the simulation argument so interesting is because a lot of people talk about, and just to go back, I always picture navigating reality like you're playing Diablo 4 or something like that, where everything's darkness, and as you move, the map is populated and created, kind of thing. And I see
mm,
that's a similar way that you can direct your thoughts and direct
yeah,
the trajectory of your life, sort of thing.
yes.
Um,
It's like you're controlling the video game character is actually something that I've heard someone say in like a spiritual, like a video on like discussing like consciousness and stuff. They said it's almost like, you're like you're observing the video game character that you're
yeah,
controlling, you
yeah.
know
Have you? So there's a podcast you should get into called Know Thyself. It's I've
Ooh,
seen a few episodes, but it's quite interesting.
that sounds
Um,
Okay.
interesting.
but the simulation one gets me because
Synopsis, please.
it's honestly it's just every episode is one of these conversations with a different kind of perspective, a different person who is you know well versed in that kind of field. It's all
Okay.
philosophy. It's all about greater, deeper understanding,
Mm,
and not just Sean. One of the things we talk about often in this episode is how most people just go through life on autopilot. We're not stopping to
yeah.
think about what's going on around us, why we're not questioning things. We just take everything as it is for face value and accept it for what it is. And
Mm.
it kind of goes in the face of what we were talking about earlier in terms of not questioning the universe, but
Mm-hmm.
There's
there's not
always
questioning the universe, and then there's just living completely in the dark, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's always contradictions and dualities I notice when it comes to when you discuss the nature of consciousness or reality.
That's what Rupert Spear calls it. Sorry, it's
Yeah,
the non-duality of consciousness. We think
exactly.
there's the consciousness of us, and then whatever it is, but it's just all real quick. I'm
Right.
going to forget the simulation argument, and I want this to be real. I want this to be so fucking real, so bad, because it would make so many of my personal problems go away. But there are essentially NPCs out there. There are
Non-player
non-player characters.
characters.
There are
Yeah.
just people out there that are
Sorry, I was
just
saying that
fucking
for the people who aren't aware of the
yeah.
language. Yeah.
I want to live in a world that if it's a simulation, there are NPCs because there are just I mean, how many times have you interacted with an individual and you're just like, are they fucking just completely clueless? Are they just
so
so fucking stunned?
so
Yeah.
me and my buddies growing up, we had a whole thing about this because we saw the Matrix as kids,
Of
and
course,
so
the matrices.
we call people NPCs. Like
Yeah, I love it.
I was like 14 and we were like calling people NPCs, and then we started calling it we started nicknaming it consumers. Um,
Okay.
and then we would start to have the difference between, oh, that's just a consumer versus that's a non-consumer. And then the nickname kind of went further and they started calling them non-consoms. It was like a joke, like, oh, you're just
Yeah.
Just a
You can
non-consom.
insult them to
yeah.
their face and they have no idea what you're saying.
And
Yeah.
it got into that edgy kind of like gamer talk where you'd be like, oh, you're just a consom, you know.
That's so fucking
um
awesome.
I love that though.
so
Yeah.
I totally get that perspective, um but I feel like what you're seeing, like the NPCs, what that is it's it's kind of like layers of numbing. People have
Yeah,
the reason
yeah. Oh,
people are
big time.
ignorant, and this all goes back to the Four Noble Truths, which is kind of where I feel like I should start off with, um, which is the truth. The first truth is obviously that suffering exists.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny, when I was a kid, I just thought like, oh, Buddhists are so nihilistic. They just like, they're just like, oh, suffering exists or whatever. But I didn't realize that
Western mentality too,
the
eh?
Western mentality is that you're trying to run away from suffering and you're trying to just consume as much like joy as you can and try to just eliminate suffering, which is just nonsense. Suffering is
Impossible.
What's
absolutely
that word?
something you have to experience and integrate into your existence. You can't just like run away from it. But the second truth is the truth of the cause of suffering. Suffering is caused by craving, uh,
Oh yeah.
desires, um,
Greediness.
greediness, even just simple desires. You'll kind of see why yogis and Hindus and stuff, they'll kind of uh, be they'll starve themselves, and someone will offer them food, and they've had like their one meal or whatever that they've asked for that day, and they won't accept that meal because the whole point is it's like they're trying to purge themselves of craving, of desire,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like they're training themselves um, to eliminate mental suffering. I like this one thing someone said one time. I heard it was suffering is pain times resistance. And so
Yeah. Yeah, resistance is a big one for me.
And so
Mm-hmm.
and so desires and craving, it's kind of like that's like adding resistance, that's adding to your suffering. And
Because
so
Mm-hmm.
they go through those practices of starving themselves and these things like that to kind of reduce that resistance. It's like they're reducing the resistance of desires and craving and
because
training themselves to not feel like, oh, I have to crave this food. I can go without the food and be totally fine and be happy, right?
there's an entrepreneur, author, whatever guy. His name's Tim Ferriss, and he's got a
Oh, I know
podcast.
of
He's
him,
been
yeah.
around for a while. Yeah, and he routinely does a fat. I don't know if he still does, but he used to. He'd wear the same pants and the same like plain t-shirt for a week, and he'd eat the same like beans and whatever for a week. And this was a very stoic approach. And he would go, "Is this what I feared?" kind of thing. And it's the same
Mm.
idea. Like we all have this in our mind of what success looks like, or what a good life looks
Yeah.
like, or whatever. And we think that it means like a brand new fucking stylish outfit every day and the best food and blah 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 blah. But I think we've covered it quite well in this episode. Is that like the simple life is what's going to bring you the most happiness, and what's important about resistance, it's not the fact that you're resisting the thing, but in
Mm-hmm.
by virtue of resisting, you're actually holding on to the thing you're trying to avoid,
Exactly,
Mm-hmm.
yes.
and you're just keeping
Mm.
it next to you. You're just keeping it
Yeah.
with you the whole time.
Yeah.
It's a little
And
bit of that like keep your enemies closer almost mentality. Like
Mm,
keep your friends.
a little, yeah. Yeah. Um I like that actually. I've never thought of it like that. That's funny. Um um but yeah, like
hedonistic.
hedonism, yeah,
That's the word I was looking for. Yeah,
yeah.
self-indulgence without consequence.
It's kind of why you see in so many religions all this emphasis on the right ways of like living, and then like practices like fasting and stuff like that,
Yeah.
um, discipline and things, cultivating discipline, because it's like that's what gives you freedom. That's what I love about Jocko's podcast, is he always says like discipline equals freedom, and it's so true. Because if you have to give in to that craving, then it owns you, right?
Hmm.
It's kind of like you're a
Yes.
slave to the desire. So doing all that work with meditation and cultivating that discipline, that's what helps you to kind of unhook yourself from that, like what you're seeing with the npcs is they've numbed themselves mentally to all this stuff that's going on, and so they just kind of keep, and it's called, I call it rushing energy. They just kind of keep going through their rushing energy of like, gotta go to work, gotta raise my kids, gotta do this thing, gotta buy the
So
next thing.
fast paced. Like
It's very
it's
fast
Cycling
paced, right?
through.
That's why I always talk about the villages, is because in a village they didn't have the ability to rush.
They
yeah.
um,
didn't they
it
didn't I
helped.
there was no need, I don't think either.
Yeah, there
Like
was no need, so it
There
kind of
weren't.
helped.
There wasn't a
everything happened
fiscal
at
year
its
where they had to
Yeah,
spend
they
pace.
their
didn't have a
budget and blah.
fiscal
You know what I
year.
mean? Like,
Things,
like,
Yeah.
hey, did
yeah,
we get fish today? Fucking nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Humans kind of need to be on that small scale because they need to just be able to appreciate, like, man, I'm so glad I got fish today.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just
I
happy
think
that I got
there's
to eat.
a
That's it. You
I
don't
think
think
there's a
about it.
number they put on just exactly what you're saying. I think it's an about 100. Like we were meant to live in groups of about 100 people, and
Oh
that's like a
fuck! It's like
manageable. That still sounds like a lot, but when you think about it, that would be like
it's the number of
newborns all the
meaningful
way
connections
to
you can have.
Yeah,
yes,
I
That's
yeah,
why
believe that.
like a company in the army is like 120 people.
Yeah,
okay,
I
yeah,
So
believe
the
that. Like,
commander of that company can know their soldiers, kind of thing.
yeah,
yes,
Fuck,
yes.
there's a name for it though. It's Bartlett's
you're right.
number.
I think my girlfriend actually told me about that just like a week ago or something. Um,
The the size of the
the
villages, you mean?
size
Yeah.
of a group of humans before like it stops working.
Dunbar's
Hmm.
number.
Oh, what's it
Dunbar's
called?
number.
Dunbar's number?
Dunbar, the
Oh,
cognitive limit to the number of people with whom one, and you know when it's a with whom,
Sorry,
it's
is it
legit.
Olivia laughing?
I can, yeah, I'm gonna have to go soon, guys. It's
Same. It's encroaching on bedtime with the
with one
kiddos.
with
right.
whom one can maintain stable social relationships.
Mm,
Okay.
social
Okay.
relationship. So yeah,
yeah.
so
That makes
Dunbar's
yeah.
number, Robin Dunbar. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Oh, yeah. So, I guess to wrap up
Well,
the
sorry. Did we cover the Four Noble Truths? I remember three.
yeah. So number one is the truth of suffering. Number
Hmm.
two is the cause of suffering, which is
Hmm.
desires and craving and things. And then the third one is that there is an end to suffering. There is like
Hmm.
a genuine path to the end of suffering. And then the fourth one is the path to the end of suffering is the eightfold path. And the eightfold path is basically just, you know, uh, right view, uh, right livelihood, right speech, basically just like a classic kind of discipline things where having sort of like a pure view or a wholesome view, for example, is going to
Yes.
help reduce your suffering and the suffering of everyone around you and things like that.
I
um,
have a question about those because I'm assuming they all start with right as the
yeah.
first word. We're not talking about this as in right or wrong.
No.
Is that correct? It's right as in that's the goal more so.
um
Or is
so
it something else?
so Buddhists frame it in a very like what is useful, what is helpful,
Okay. Okay.
right? So it's not really that it's like right or wrong, because Buddhists
It's like
obviously
truth.
they never say
Yes.
like you were right or wrong to do anything. Everything just is.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we put labels on everything and
Yeah,
values that are
we add that lens of like judgment on things.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they really mean by right is sort of, because it differs for every context, right? You can't really just say like, okay, have this view and it'll always be correct.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's sort of like what is the most helpful or most useful view, let's say in this example, right
Mm-hmm.
view, that will help reduce your suffering and other people's suffering. um, I'll give you an example that's really good actually. Is right speech is speech that um,
It's number
isn't
three.
it doesn't hurt you, and it doesn't cause distress in other people and things like that. So
No
you
lying, no abusive
yeah.
speech, no divisive speech, which means American politics are done, and no idle chatter, which
Yeah.
obviously means this podcast is pointless, I guess.
Not right speech. Oops.
um
Oopsie.
yeah, pretty
Oh my
much.
god, I was saying this the other day. Sorry, quote from Kevin in the office. Why say many word when few word
Why
be
say a lot?
trig?
When me president,
Mhm.
they see.
And you see that a lot with Zen Buddhism, because they boil everything down into very like simple kind of little
Simple
phrases and
truths,
stuff like
though.
that.
You know,
Simple
Yes.
truths.
we want so bad for the answers to all of our problems to be complex and
Oh
complicated,
yeah. Oh
but
yeah.
the solutions truly are simple.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
the way, to quote the Mandalorian, this is the way. Uh, it's just a simple approach. We let everything else cloud our judgment and cloud our understanding to make it think that all these other things that we want to be truths to be true, but they're not. We just
Hmm.
Mhm.
buy into the propaganda, so to
Mhm.
speak.
Ah,
Mhm.
yes.
I don't know. It's just
Um
my humble opinion.
no, I agree. And so yeah, I kind of have spent from 25, I'm now 31. I've spent from 25 to 31 kind of on this spiritual path. Um I started to really closely follow this one community, Plum Village, which was led by Thich Nhat Hanh, uh, who's a wonderful teacher to consider like your main teacher. He was a very wonderful Zen monk, um, who lived till 95, I believe. Yeah, he lived until he was 95. Um, he has probably one of the most impressive teaching careers of like any spiritual teacher in the last century. Um, he died recently, I think 2022 was when he
Okay.
passed away.
Wow.
And he was kind of the guy who, when he was growing up as a monk, because he wanted to be, he kind of grew up in Vietnam and saw this Buddhist kind of imagery and wanted to become like the Buddha.
Mm-hmm.
And as a monk growing up, um, he had to like fight his like conservative monk like forefathers who only believed that you
Fascinating.
could meditate formally when you were sitting down. And he developed walking meditation. He developed, meditating when you do the dishes, and meditating while you bike, meditating while you drive.
Wow.
um, he was considered very progressive in the Buddhist kind of like space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he ended up developing his own whole community and everything like that. And I noticed that Buddhists do things in a way that I really like, because it avoids all of the like cultiness. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
I noticed with Hinduism and stuff, it kind of lends itself to becoming like a bit cultier, like
Mm-hmm.
idolizing and things like that. In Buddhism, there's a lot of equanimity and a lot of like non idolization and things like that. And uh, it's really cool. I love him as a teacher. I've followed him a lot, and I could probably delve deeper into my relationship with Buddhism and all that stuff in a future
I
podcast.
will say this. Yeah, I was like we can do a deep dive on. Oh, sorry, Colin, your mic is off. Oh,
There we go. I was muted because my daughter's being
sorry,
a shithead in the background.
you're
I apologize.
yelling. I feel like you were yelling something, but I couldn't hear you at all.
No, I was
Hey,
saying,
that's not right speech.
yeah, I I was saying there's definitely gonna have to be a part two, and this is the longest episode we've ever recorded, which
Oh,
is
really?
awesome
Yes.
because
So
it
thank
does not
you. Yeah.
feel like it's been long at all. I hope our
I agree.
listeners feel the
I
same
was
way.
yeah. I just like had a peek at the time and I was like, "Oh my god, yeah." Like okay.
I feel
Yeah,
like
we must have you back on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this. Um any
I want to say again.
yeah,
Sorry, Janet. Uh,
yes.
I feel like you said a lot of things. I don't know if you were planning on saying as much as you did in terms of your personal journey. Um, but regardless of any of that, sharing those things is not easy. It's
Mhm.
hard to
Mhm.
admit those things to yourself, let alone to other people, let alone
Mhm.
on a very public forum, well, modestly public forum,
Modestly, yeah.
such as the podcast. But I mean, obviously, courage is not something that's foreign to you anymore. And I really, really want to thank you so much for sharing that with us, and recognizing that these things are surmountable. And to that end, I just
Mhm.
want to tell everyone out there that's listening, if you're
Yeah.
struggling with stuff, if you're having difficulties, please reach out to people. People care, people want to help, people
Mhm.
Mhm.
want to hear. And Sean, I know you understand this. Sometimes you're on a train and no one's going to stop you from getting off that train. um, but thank you so much for sharing that with us. It's
Yeah.
I don't know, I feel so
It
privileged
yeah.
to have you share that with
I
us.
really appreciate the platform to be able to kind of talk about what I went through, because it really has sort of defined the next stage of my life and sort of the path that I'm on spiritually.
Mm-hmm.
And I have dreams now of uh, building a very mindful life. I've already been kind of building one. I can get all into
Yeah.
that next time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been kind of building like a very mindful day to day lifestyle and minimizing waste and consumerism and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And coinciding with that, it's almost like it's like emerged within me. Like, oh, I understand. Like, I think what I want to do with my life is to build like a Zen community to kind of help other people get through the kind of challenges that I got through. It's almost like the suffering defined in a way, um, what I think is valuable in life and treating people uh, better and sort of um, what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like uh, this has sort of opened my eyes to uh, what do I want to be in the world? And I think I want to move and be remembered in the world as someone who was very kind and warm and helped as many people as they could. When you die, what do you want to be kind of remembered for? You don't want to be remembered as, some jerk who was really shitty to be around. you
Yeah,
know? Um, and
it's
so it's like it's difficult for sure, and it's very hard, and like you said, it can be very hard to open up in a public forum, but in a lot of
I don't
ways
want to say especially for men, but I think like,
you should.
yeah, it
I'll
can
say
be
It is
men
for
and
sure.
especially for men.
women are different, and I think men have a harder time going through
Yeah,
difficult, like,
For
childbirth is
sure.
harder for women. Suicidal ideations are harder for men. There's just we all have our differences. Terrible joke. Um,
it all evens out.
yeah, it all evens out in the wash. Yeah, we all suffer equally. Um,
Yeah.
I it's
Sean,
weird because
thank you. Yeah.
So thank you.
Sorry,
I,
it's
I think
weird calling you.
I think you guys having me on, it really kind of it's really helping me just as much as it's helping you in just kind of understanding like who am I and how do I want to move through the rest of my life.
Of
um,
course.
I
yeah,
was gonna say I've never known you for we've not had a whole lot of opportunity to interact, but I get a good sense of people, and it's sort of hearing your story kind of makes me think that you spent a whole portion of your life trying to be what other people expected of you
yeah.
and fighting that fight and resisting who you were to be
Mm-hmm.
those things brought you
Yeah.
to that point, and it helped you find your true self,
Mm,
which is probably not something that many people get to say, and not for the journey's sake, but just for the actual ability to say, I know who I am, I know what
Mm-hmm.
I'm about. I even think the people that say that oftentimes are probably just posturing. They want to make it
Mm-hmm.
sound like they haven't, but I think where you're at is truly remarkable, and is
Yeah.
a very privileged place to be, in the sense that it takes a lot of honesty and a lot of guts to get there.
Yeah.
Um,
yeah, being authentic, living authentically, and really trying to pursue living like a very like mindful life where you're reducing suffering. It's hard. Like you have to really face a lot of uncomfortability on an hourly basis, literally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Realizing all the time, how do you treat people? Do you treat people the right way? um, you know you grow up with so much conditioning, so many things slip. I find in the past I've really struggled with letting other people talk and interrupting people and stuff, and
I
I
still
still do.
struggle with that.
Yeah, and I still do. Um, but that's what life is now. It's trying to work every day to chip away at those conditionings and to be the best version of yourself you can possibly be, and measuring your success by different metrics. Other people measure
Yeah.
success, um, by business or material wealth, and sometimes people measure success by kind of like conceptual wealth, right? um, control over a group of people, or control in a relationship, or people will kind of seek like those kind of pursuits. And I think that basing my measure of success on how much I can serve other people, how much I can reduce suffering, how much I can kind of be the white blood cell of
Nice.
humanity.
You
That's
started saying
something.
white, and I had no idea where you were going with it. I was like,
I
the
got
great white
nervous for
monk.
a
You know what I mean?
second.
Oh, I love it. That's great.
No, yeah, me and my girlfriend say this all the time. Is like we want to be the white blood cells of the world
Mm-hmm.
who help
Mm-hmm.
clean and kind of take care of the
Yeah.
planet and things like
Do a
that,
little
right?
bit of the work that people aren't seeing
Yeah.
necessarily, but is
Mm,
is essential to the betterment of everyone. Yeah.
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 So thank you for having me on, and
Thank you.
I
Thank
Thank you
you,
so much. This
honestly.
was a
Yeah.
very fun conversation too.
I had a really great time. You guys
Too.
also had brought up like so many interesting points. I really loved having this conversation with you
Yeah,
guys.
thanks for all the rabbit holes.
Yeah,
That's what I
Yeah.
said.
it
Good
was good rabbit
conversation with good
holes.
people. Yeah,
Yeah,
like everyone's got ideas, everyone's got perspectives, and I
yeah.
just want to
Yeah.
take as many of those things from people as is possible. Because
Yes.
one of my things is, you know, you talk about the advent of art, AI, and stuff, and it's going to take over all the jobs and whatnot. But I think this whole existence is boring if we don't share our stories, share our experiences, and
Mm-hmm.
interact with other people. Because I mean, I feel like that's the whole point outside of the suffering is to share that information, share that knowledge, share the stories and the journeys and the experiences, because that's what colors, sort of, to be a little too cliched, the blank canvas that is this life. Otherwise
Mm-hmm.
it's
Mm,
there's like, I don't know, we get to decide what it is, and if we don't share with other people, then you're just painting stick figures for the rest of your life, and it's just
Mm.
bleak. I don't know.
Not so
Anyway,
great. Yeah.
I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna say
I
thank you and turn it over to
yes.
Jenna.
I'm so thankful. Colin, you I feel like you said it so well. I don't want to just say exactly what you said, but Sean, you were beautiful in sharing everything. I know that that is not easy. It is hard. I don't want to say I'm proud of you, but I am proud of you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
and you should be proud of
It's not my
yourself.
place. Yeah, be proud of yourself. More importantly, it is hard to share those like deep dark moments of
thank you.
ourselves. Yeah. And that was beautiful. And I cannot wait to have you on again. And yeah, for all of our listeners, thank you for listening and toodles.
Okay,
uh
we're off. We're done.
we're
I
thank you.
have so
Damn.
many tabs open, Sean, for all these